Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast, where on today's show, gents, we're going over another home win at the Gtech. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It always feels great after a win, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, all good. It's just 1 week we seem to be like really on the edge of that European places. And then the next week, if we lose, we just seem to be looking over our shoulders again. And that is how it seems to go at the moment. But yeah, a good win, a much needed win. I think there's probably more pressure on that game than maybe any other we've had this season. And now hopefully we can go into the next week with not as much pressure on us.
100%. I think kind of going into it, we mentioned on the last pod, Dan, where we were talking about Burnley last season, and you could really see the golfing quality between the two sides when we kind of just blew them away. Obviously, we're going to get into it and the game it was, but I think it is massive. It's a big 3 points, especially with the games we've got coming up against Arsenal and Tottenham. But like I said, we'll get into it. Just remember, before we get going, drop a comment down below with your thoughts around the Burnley game, ahead of the Arsenal game on Wednesday. We're recording this on Monday. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels and follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Tweet of the week was actually given to me by a follower this week. I don't know if you boys have seen it, but there was a little exchange on Twitter. So shout out Bag of Donuts on Twitter for finding this. And someone's quoted Keith Andrews' quotes on Michael Coyote, and he said, I think Michael Coyote has been nothing short of a sensation for us. Blah, 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 blah. Just basically waxing lyrical about Michael Coyote. Someone then quote tweeted saying, speaks volumes that not a single fan gives a solitary fuck about Coyote giving a pen away. Kids bank so much good faith. That was at Fifth on Twitter. And then Ghost of Champ JC, who's a regular feature on Tweet of the Week, said the first mistake he's made in almost a year, whereas he's probably done 100 good things. He's probably allowed to do 5 more times of that before anyone is allowed to say anything. And then I think at Fifth replied with a great tweet in response. He just said, he'd have to shag my wife 7 times before I got the hump with him. Craig, is that fair?
Well, as someone who's not married, I'm going to have to... I can't speak for the married people out there, but I'm not sure my missus would agree with that one herself. You know?
To the wider point of what he's trying to get at, Dan, it did feel like I was watching it. It just felt I can't even be mad at him because it was a Stonewall pen, but he has just got so much credit in the bank, doesn't he, Coyote?
Yeah, it helps when you go up the other end and score twice more shortly after to win 3-1, and then it doesn't really matter in the end. But yeah, he's been one of our best players this season. Everyone makes mistakes occasionally. He was a bit sloppy maybe and not being aware of his surroundings, not getting rid of the ball quick enough. But yeah, he's done so much for us. I think it'll be a long time before we start calling for his place in the team to be questioned. So yeah, no worries, it happens.
100%. Let's just get straight into the game. Craig, initial thoughts upon reading the lineup. Jensen in for Yarmo, Hickey in for Aya. Were you happy with those changes?
Hickey for Aya, absolutely. That was one that kind of surprised me at Brighton, that we had the left-back options on the bench and we still went for Christopher Aya. I mean, it is what it is in regards to that game. But I was a bit surprised to see Yarmo dropped out for Jensen. It was a bit of a surprising one for me. But we've had conversations about Yarmo all season saying, does he need a break? You know, it's his first season with international football as well. He could burn himself out. And, you know, for 10 minutes of the game, Jensen probably did all right. But it could have been a completely different story. We could have been having a different conversation if that Hannibal hadn't dived for whatever reason after Jensen tries that flick on the edge of the penalty area. But other than that, it's the lineup you expect to see. It's the lineup we thought we'd see. But yeah, I was a bit surprised he dropped Yarmo. But having someone like him to bring off the bench as well with his pay and his tenacity and whatnot, it worked for us as well.
And he's only 21 years old, Dan. That's the thing. Like it's like Craig said, it's the first time he's playing Premier League football and international football at the same time. And he's only going to get better. But I have seen, a few comments. I did a video on TikTok. Someone commented on it, kind of slating Yarmo a little bit. I think there was someone in our replies saying, mad how much more creative our midfield looks when a certain someone isn't playing. I assume he was talking about Yarmo. But I think the kind of, I don't know why the jury's out on Yarmo, to be honest, Dan, a little bit, because I think we've been kind of talking about him as one of our better players this season. He's had a few real standout games. But did you like Jensen replacing him on Saturday?
I thought it was a good game for Jensen. I think we're approaching the time of the season. There's so many games over Christmas. We're playing again on Wednesday. We're playing again on Saturday. I think we've got the City Cup game coming up in midweek in a couple of weeks' time. So I think we're going to see naturally just more changes now. So yeah, Keith Andrews special there. So I think, you need to give players a rest here and there this part of the season. I think Jensen, in terms of what we thought the game would look like, in terms of Burnley being difficult to break down, perhaps sitting back a little bit, I think, is more capable of playing maybe that killer pass, or creating that action. And to Jensen's credit, he's been involved in goals this season, whereas that's probably the bit that's missing from Yarmo's game. But I think usually, and I'm sure he'll be back in on Wednesday, because we'll need his legs around the pitch next to Henderson. We'll need him to cover a lot of ground, and we'll need him to have a really good game against Arsenal.
And the thing is, I think they are quite similar players. I think probably Armio definitely edges it in terms of out of possession, like you mentioned, his ability to get around the pitch, and his dual winning abilities as well. But in terms of what they are, even that kind of move between Dango and Jensen on halfway, that was probably our best move of the match, or best move of the first half at least. That was that could have been Yarmo doing that flick that Jensen did, because he's got that kind of quality as well. But Craig, what were the problems with the first half? I just thought it was. I mean, we knew what it was going to be with Keith Andrews and Scott Parker going head to head, but it was, I don't know, it was just very predictable in possession, I thought.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where I said to my dad, actually, it's strange seeing a team sit back in a bit of a mid to low block against us, when it has been us doing that against teams a lot. I mean, I say that like we haven't played Newcastle, Villa, Chelsea, Liverpool, City at home, United at home this season already. So that's sort of expected against those kind of opposition, isn't it? And it was a bit of a turn where we were the team that was going to control the game. And we controlled the game without issues, but also without creating anything for 80 minutes. It was a dull affair. It looked like a lower Premier League clash for 80 minutes. And I know you've put it in the running order. There's only really one clear-cut chance that I can recollect in the first half, which is the Nathan Collins header.
Yeah.
But it was just, it wasn't cagey. We didn't look at, I mean, obviously I've mentioned the Jensen incident already, where he tries that chop and Hannibal dives. But that was the only real moment where we put ourselves into a spot of bother. We controlled it without creating anything.
You mentioned that that Collins chance, Craig. I wish that he'd put that away, Dan, because that would have done wonders for his confidence. I'm not knocking Collins, because I actually thought Saturday was one of his better games. But I just think if he puts that away and he gets a goal, I just think that would have done so much for his confidence. But you're right, it was a game where we were kind of starved of chances a little bit. But I still think we had, like, by the time it got to 80 minutes, Dango has a good chance with a header. Collins has that one in the first half. Thiago had one on the turn. I think on a different day, we could go into the 80 minutes being 1 or 2-0 up, especially if Collins buries that header. Go on.
I was going to say the second half was completely different to the first half. Even the first 10 minutes of that second half was completely different to the previous 45 that we'd had. We came out, it felt like we came out all guns blazing. We created chances in the second half, and you've got that Dango one that you mentioned that breezes past the far post. But we said it, didn't we, as well? We have to score while we're on top. You know, we had the one ruled out for offside, which Dango was offside for, and it could have been different. But we need to be more clinical when we're on top. And it's funny saying that when we've won the game 3-1.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think just the nature of that final 10 minutes, and we'll get to it, was just mental. But I want to talk about Damsgaard and kind of what changed at halftime, Dan. But with Damsgaard, in the first half, he was our biggest threat. In the second half, he didn't get taken off and was our biggest threat too. Nice to see him pulling the strings again.
I was really worried about that the second half. I was like, in 10 minutes, Keith normally pulls him off for Yanelt or somebody. No, it was really good, and it shows this type of game where we can get the ball down, get him in spaces. He roams across the pitch. He was everywhere at one point at that start of the second half, and everything comes through him. Again, we still want to see him score more goals. He had a couple of chances, but I think that goes for a lot of players in this team. You know, Hickey missed one as well. Like we said, Collins missed one. And, you know, we're lucky to have someone like Thiago up front who's scoring so many for us. But I do want to see more of the team contribute in that area of the pitch. You know, too many of our players, you know, have never scored for Brentford in some of their cases. So I do want to see others contribute. But yeah, Damsgaard back somewhere towards his best. You know, when he's on the ball, you're confident that he's likely to do something. He's always looking forward. He's always trying to create something. And, you know, he's unlucky to come out of that game with no assist either.
There was a couple of flashes from Damsgaard in that second half of the kind of quality that we saw from him last season. A couple in front of the North Stand. One where he somehow squeezes the ball through to Kevin Schade down the left and it ends up with Kevin Schade squaring it, but no one was in the box. And another where he just kind of takes Hannibal out of the game, but Damsgaard's pass into the box wasn't really good enough to kind of find someone. But we would load in the box and Schade, Dango and Thiago were always in those areas, but it just looked like for 80 minutes we really couldn't find them. But to see those little flashes, I think is what we've kind of missed this season, and to see those in the second half are really, really good. Keith said at halftime, Craig, that he wanted the fullbacks to be more aggressive. I did notice Coyote was bombing up the right-hand side a lot more than he was in the first half. And like you mentioned, we had that flurry of opportunities. Hickey had one that he balloons over the bar, which I actually think was probably the best chance for us of the game. But bar the Collins one, Hickey just kind of spoons it well over. But it really was starting to look like one of those days, Craig, in front of goal.
You get into 70, 75 minutes in front of goal as well, where we're peppering them with chances, and you're looking around at people going, this has got 1-0 Burnley written all over it. This has got 1-0 Burnley written all over it, because we were massively on top, and we did well to create the chances that we created. Again, we need to be more clinical when we're on top in spells of games, because looking ahead at the next, we're away to Arsenal on Wednesday. If we have a spell on top, we don't, and we're not clinical in front of goal, and we get opportunities, we'll get punished a lot more than what we got punished with Burnley. I mean, Arsenal are going to do something different to what any team can do to us.
Yeah, we'll chat about Arsenal. Let's talk about the pen, because I've seen a few Burnley fans raging slightly. I don't know where I am on this. But first of all, I think Thiago trying to take the ball off Dango is really funny, but also at the same time could have really cost us if he gets there before Dango, because he would have been offside. Are we in the territory of, because he's given it on the pitch, to either of you, because he's given it on the pitch, it's not clear and obvious error, so it has to be given? Is that what we're thinking?
I think so, because I still don't know whether it's a penalty or not. So, you know, it's not clear to me that it's definitely not a penalty. So in those situations, I think if the referee gives it, then you've got to stick with the decision. But we're a bit fortunate perhaps there. I mean, we've had so many penalties this season, if you think about it as well. And, you know, it probably is down to having the likes of, you know, very quick direct wingers like Schade and Dango, which causes problems. You know, I think we've had 6 penalties at least now in the 13 games. So 7
if you count Sunderland
7,
as well, I think.
Yeah, so that's must be some kind of record. So hopefully we can keep it up, and hopefully Thiago can keep scoring them as well.
There was someone that sent me a stat on Twitter. I don't know if you boys check the DMs, but since Brentford have been, since 2019, we have scored 49 out of 53 penalties in the Premier League and in the Championship, which is a conversion rate of 92.4%, which is quite incredible. Someone also sent me that Thiago, who stepped up and buried his penalty, is now 300-1 to be top scorer in the Premier League this season. Are you lumping on, Craig?
300-1. I mean, Haaland's got to have a quiet spell at some point, hasn't he? Yeah, it's worth a fiver. That's worth a fiver.
What's everyone else's odds if he's 300-1? Because he's quite clearly the second top scorer at the moment.
To be fair, so I don't know when this guy placed the bet, but he did place he placed a tenner on it at some point, but I don't know when it was. But he messaged the podcast account and said,
I imagine he'd be shorter than that now.
I know, yeah. You'd think so. But Dan, Thiago steps up, buries his penalty along the floor again. Happy? I mean, considering he missed against Brighton, I was kind of hoping that he'd thump it in the top bins like we spoke about last week. But, credit to him. He had to step up and bury it, and he did.
It was more in the corner. I'll give him that. It was better. I think it was better than some of his penalties. It was, if you're not going to smash it, you've got to be precise in your placement. And I think it was a little bit better in the placement. He scored most of his penalties. We can't doubt him too much. But, he's only missed the one because Shana took the other one that we missed. So, I'm sure he'll work on it. I'm sure he'll realise that he's got to be a bit more varied, particularly if we're getting penalties every week. So he's got to, plan for it every week. So hopefully he will keep scoring. For a team that's had such a good record of penalties the last few years, I still can't look when we're about to take one. So
100%.
yeah.
I think Thiago's only had one bad penalty so far, and that was obviously the one that the keeper at Brighton, Verbruggen, saved. If anybody is curious, his odds have been slashed to 8-1 to be top scorer. So I'm afraid we might not get those 300-1.
Yeah, don't lump on anymore.
Don't lump on. Yeah.
I don't think you should lump on it, but still might be worth a fiver. Do you know what I mean?
I thought we'd fucked it with that Kayode pen being given away. I mean, the way that Fleming buried his pen is something that I've not seen Thiago do. That was a bullet into the right hand corner. I think even if Kelleher goes the right way, he's not saving that. But I think, just when you think the game has gone, or just when you think you won the game, then the game has gone again. And then Jordan Henderson, who I was calling for basically the whole of the second half to be hooked because I thought he was so poor in possession at times. With that ball, Dan, that was like such an incredible pass and it just into the exact right area. And Thiago's there in the right place to score his 11th of the season, which makes him the fastest Brentford player in the Premier League era to reach double figures for Brentford.
Yeah, just to go back a bit, as soon as we scored the penalty, we backed off. We completely dropped so deep. And you could see the coach on the touchline telling the players to push forward, and they weren't doing it until the penalty. And it's a habit we need to get out of because we've dropped a lot of points from winning positions this season. And, as soon as we got the second, we didn't do that anymore. We did keep pressing. And obviously we were rewarded by getting the third in the end. So that's something we've got to watch out for because, again, if we didn't react like we did to the 1-1, we'd be sitting here talking about, a really frustrating game where we took so long to get that breakthrough. And then when we do, we sit back and we allow them to score straight away. But yeah, Hendo, great assist for Dango as well for the third one. He's got that in him. Again, I thought first half particularly is a bit sloppy. I thought as a team we were a bit sloppy, maybe not quite patient enough in terms of waiting for the chance, giving the ball away perhaps a bit too sloppily. We only just about had more possession than them. And, maybe we could have controlled it a little bit more. But he's got that in him, and we've seen that. It's almost a trademark now. He's done it several times this season, and he can play that type of ball. And it's a little bit different to what Damsgaard and Jensen offer. But he's always got that threat. And I thought he actually got around a lot more than normal. I don't know if that's because he didn't have Yarmo next to him. But you could see him second half. He has that energy. He certainly doesn't look like a 36-year-old when he's on the pitch. And he really covered a lot of ground. Hopefully now he can recover because obviously he's not played in any of the Carabao Cup games this season. So hopefully he can recover and be ready to go again on Wednesday. That's something he hasn't had to do so far this season.
I think I'd love to see some running stats because you're absolutely right. I think Jordan Henderson might be up there with topping it, especially even in the first half when he was like chasing balls back to their keeper, just absolutely sprinting around the pitch. But yeah, Thiago in the right place at the right time, Craig. And his goal catalogue, and it's been mentioned, but it's mentioned a few times on Twitter. He might have the funniest goal catalogue I've ever seen so far because there's 11 goals for him, and each one of them is like. I'm not taking it away from anything because obviously there's 5 pens in there. There's a few good finishes, but there's also just a few like deflections, keeper save, but right place at the right time. Right,
it's a strike. That's a striker's job, is it not? It's a striker's job to be in the right place at the right time. I mean, you've got to be there as a striker, haven't you, to score 11 goals in 13 games? At the start of the season, Dan wanted to ship him off back to wherever, be it Belgium or be it Brazil, get him gone. Dan wanted him out.
You wanted Hendo out as well.
I didn't want him
Never
in.
wanted
To be
Hendo
fair.
in.
I didn't want him in, and now I never want him to leave. So yeah. So all right, I don't need to apologise again. I don't think for that one. But if he's only scored, do you know what I would say? If he's only scored 5 goals at this point of the season, are we saying he's not doing well enough? Or are we saying, his first full fit season, he's got 5 goals in 13 games? That's an all right return. If you look at that over a season, you're looking at 15, 20 goals, things like that. I said before the season started, he'll get 15 goal contributions.
Yeah.
He's already on 11 goals. I don't think he's actually got an assist yet because the one from Villa wasn't credited to him because Dango missed the original chance.
Well, no one else is really scoring, so he can't get any assists.
I mean, that's a very good point. But if he scores 25 goals this season and they're all tap-ins or penalties, I could not care. I really couldn't care. If he's at the end of the season and he's scored 25 goals and they're all from inside the 6-yard box, well done to him. He's in the right place at the right time all the time. Credit to him.
I was about to say the thing that worries me, but it doesn't worry me because our record of signing these strikers is just impeccable. But the podcast that I did with Tim Vickery, and he basically said Thiago's got a big ambition to play for Brazil. At the moment, at the rate he's banging in goals, there is no way. And I heard Keith Andrews say in his pre-match presser that Brazil are very much aware of the form that he's in. I don't know if there's been contact between Brazil and the club or whoever's kind of in charge of the call-ups, whether it's Carlo Ancelotti or the Brazilian FA. But the thing that worried me is that Tim Vickery was pretty certain that for him to get a Brazil call-up, he will have to leave Brentford because he's not played for a big club in Brazil. So, I mean, if he continues at his current rate, he will be off next summer. That much you can say for free. We'll probably sell him to...
I don't know. As soon as then, he's got to have a fairly big contract with us. I would have thought because he's a fairly new signing. I think he probably needs to show it over a little bit longer period. In my defense with what Craig was saying about me and Thiago, I don't think anyone could have predicted after seeing how he played in the first couple of games this season, even though he scored the penalty on the opening day. I don't, or the header on the opening day. Sorry, I don't understand. No, sorry, I just don't think anyone would have foreseen what he's gone on to do this season. And I love him now; it's great, but he has transformed his performances from those first few games in the season. And, he's got to be praised for that. He would have known he wasn't good enough. And, now, not just as he's playing so well, he's such a likable person as well. And, he's always got that smile on his face. And I really hope he's not injured because towards the end, he went straight off down the tunnel. He wasn't there after the game when the team went round the pitch. He didn't look too happy in the tunnel as he was going in. So hopefully it's just a precaution and we'll see him again in midweek. But, to lose him now would be a massive blow given the lack of backups we have and obviously Dango going off soon as well.
I think with Thiago as well, the thing that impresses me about him a lot is that he's got a bit of everything to his game, especially with the hold-up play. Because the hold-up play, I can understand what you're saying at the start of the season. It was pretty much non-existent. Pretty sure now he's up there, if not the most, in terms of aerial duels won. But he can run in behind too. He can score headers. He can score pens. I just think if he bags, if on his current trajectory, he's going to bag over 20 goals. And if he does, we'll probably sell him to United for 100 million next summer. But you don't think he's going to go? I just don't know. Like when you have a season that standout, Ivan Toney would have gone when he scored 20 goals if it wasn't for the ban. But
he had a good few years at Brentford under his belt already. He'd done it in the Championship. He had a couple of seasons playing regularly in the Premier League. This is really Thiago's first season for Brentford, despite obviously technically it being a second due to injury. I just can't see him. You could arguably say the same for how good Damsgaard was last season. That teams might have been looking at him.
Yeah.
And I think he would have needed to repeat that this season. I don't think he's quite hit the same heights this season, so he might be all right for another year with Damsgaard. But I think he would have needed to have shown that same level for another season to really get the big boys looking at him.
We said it already. It only takes 10 good games for Brentford for teams to start looking at you.
They'll be tracking him, but there's a difference between them first starting to track him and then actually coming in for him and being prepared to pay what it takes.
Let us know. Let us know in the comments. I think that's a good talking point. If Thiago continues at his current scoring trajectory, will there be other clubs looking at him in the summer? And will we sell? What will be his price? That's a good one, considering his contract. But obviously, Dango seals the win. We've not talked about the third goal. Just on Dango as well, Craig. That's 3 penalties he's won back to back in the league.
Yeah,
unreal.
But I think he's probably won the most penalties this season, isn't he? Because he won this one, he won Brighton, he won Newcastle, but no, he didn't win. Yeah, he won one at Brighton. Sharda won one at Brighton.
Should have had 2 against Newcastle. Or
should have had 2. Should have had 2. But the funny thing is, we're looking at this penalty that we got on the weekend, going, you could argue a case that wasn't a penalty, and then we look at the one that wasn't, that he dived in quotes for against Newcastle. We're like, how isn't that a penalty? Retribution, if you ask me.
It's a good finish for the third as well. I thought from Dango to kind of get away from the challenge, nip it around the corner.
I think that Reece Nelson does really well, because he's the one that brings the ball down, gets Dansgaard into play, who pops it through in that space to Henderson. And I think that Dango does well not to take that chance too early. Some players might have snatched at that, but he rises the challenge from the defender. Yeah, it goes a little bit wide, but when the goalkeeper rushes out in the way in which he did, if he gets a quick shot away, which he does, the ball ends up in the back of the net. I just love watching Henderson celebrate goals, by the way. Every single one. I love it.
It's because he's like, in his head, he's thinking about your quotes on the podcast, so he gives it the beans every single time.
Good. Long may that continue.
Should we talk about some players? You mentioned Nelson there. A lot of people were kind of counting for him to start the game. Obviously, he won't be able to play against Arsenal, but it was, despite not doing much, and I think only touching the ball a few times, Dan, he does make a difference. And yeah, I'm hesitant to talk about Sharda again. We've had a couple of questions on Twitter about Sharda. Jamie on Twitter said, when will Sharda be left on the bench after 3 very poor performances? I don't think he was amazing against Burnley on Saturday. I would love to see Nelson start a game. What do you reckon on that?
I would have still started Nelson over Sharda in this one. I think it would have been the sort of game. Again, Sharda's strength, if anything, is getting in behind and being able to hurt teams on the counter. And it wasn't really a game for that. And I actually thought he really struggled against Kyle Walker. And Kyle Walker got into his head a little bit at times. And, it just wasn't very helpful. I was surprised to see Keith Andrews take him off, because normally it's Dango that gets hooked. So, at least he's shown that he's able to do that. He's not afraid to make the change if needed. I think Nelson just needs a bit of time. It's hard for any player to come in and look brilliant straight away when you've barely played this season. It would have been a great one for him to play, given that he can't play on Wednesday as well. So I hope we see more of him. I think we will see more of him, because when Dango goes, he's surely got to just slot in there, because there's no other options really.
We should praise the subs as well, but subs has been like the main thing we've criticised Andrews for. He takes Aaron Hickey off at 74, takes Nelson, brings Nelson on at 75 as well. It still felt a little late to me, because that flurry of chances kind of came and went within about a 15-minute spell of the second half starting. But credit where credit's due. Rico Henry comes on, makes difference down the left-hand side. Nelson comes on. We've already spoken about it. So credit to Andrews for the subs. I think more it's changing the games that we know that it's changing the games where the quality of the teams is a bit more balanced. And I think we all went into the Burnley game thinking this should be a win, but we have to say that, because we have been criticising him for subs so far this season. Anything else from the game that you want to touch on before we get on some questions?
I don't think there was too much else to talk about.
No, it's just that final 15 minutes.
It's funny. You look at it, on the face of it, it looks like a routine win. But then when you break the game down, it was 80 minutes of not fantastic football, 10 minutes of a really good game. Yeah,
no, 100%. I think obviously the penalty accounts for a lot, but 2.75 XG to their 0.94. I'm just looking at. And that's I put a tweet out, and I said it was harder than it needed to be, but it's not like we didn't have big chances in the game. The Collins header, the Hickey chance, Dango header. It just felt like it was harder than it needed to be. But thank God, because
they're not a bad team. I don't think they're a bad team. I think the promoted teams this season are better than what we've seen in the last couple of years. I don't think they offer much going forward, but I think they're quite well organised, quite defensively solid. And I think, they've shown that in most of their games this season, and they just haven't quite got on the right end of results, similarly to this one, really.
Well, when I did the Burnley preview, he was saying, they've beaten all the teams around them. They've beaten Leeds, they've beaten Sunderland, they beat Forest as well, I want to say. So it's not like they've had, or they drew against Forest maybe, but it's not like they've had like a terrible start to the season. He was saying that they're around kind of where they'd expect to be, if not slightly better. And it wasn't the game that we played against Burnley the last time in the Prem, because that was when we really saw the difference, or the difference in quality between the two sides. We were 3-0 up. But let's get on to some questions. You mentioned AFCON, Dan. Gary on Twitter saying, with Dan go off to AFCON very soon, should we not have Núñez or Donovan at least on the bench for the next 2 games? Either of you want to have a stab at that one?
I think so. I think I don't expect much from these players to come in and do much, but we need to have options on the bench. And rather than adding an extra centre back or another left back, you may as well put them on, throw them on if you need to throw the dice. If you're 2-0 down in a game, you've got nothing to lose by, bringing them on, giving them the freedom to try and do something. You never know. You do see it sometimes. They come good and they survive in those moments. I do think long term they need loans, but whilst we're so short on the ground in terms of attacking options, assuming Nelson comes in, really then you just got KLP on the bench, and I'm not convinced he's going to do enough in the final third. I think we just do need that little bit of injection just to give the opposition something to think about in games.
Especially Donovan. I think after that Grimsby game, I so want to see him get on a Premier League pitch and just run at people. But I saw that Núñez got sent off for the B team when he played the other day. Did either of you see that? Straight red. Sam Saunders played with 10 men for, I think, 60 minutes it was. But yeah, apparently it was a really good performance. So yeah, I'd like to see both of them on the bench, especially Núñez, given how little we've seen of him. I think he the last time he played or he featured for Brentford was away at Arsenal last season, or he was on a couple of benches, but made his debut against Arsenal at the Emirates last season in like the final 10 minutes. So it'd definitely be good to see him again. Craig, Dan on Twitter kind of answered his own question. He said, was the first Burnley the poorest 45 minutes of football that we've seen since moving from Griffin Park? I think that might be a stretch. I don't know if it's the worst. You're shaking your head. I don't understand.
I am shaking my head so much. When we was 3-1 down against Wolves,
yeah,
at half time, after a disaster class from Nathan Collins when he gave them like 2 assists, that was the worst half of football since moving.
Yeah.
This wasn't great. It wasn't brilliant. It wasn't an enjoyable half of football. It was dross football for the majority of it. But we've had some shockers. We've had some shockers. I can tell you that for sure.
Norwich at home, first season up. That was
poor.
That was 1-0 down in that one.
That was poor.
Any others that spring to mind? Let us know in the comments. I'm trying to think of terrible halves of football.
Probably the second half against Fulham last season.
Oh god,
was bad. So much so that people purged it from their memory. But yeah, Wolves at home is the one that really sticks out to me. And I think there was one that we was like 3 or 4 down to Liverpool at half time in one game as well, and that was a stinker from us.
Yeah,
ignoring the fact that it's Liverpool, but no, it's up there. But it's not the best, that's for sure. Let
us know in the comments, Griffin Park and Gtech, what are the worst halves of football that we've ever seen? That's I don't know if that's a good game to play. I don't know if it's a fun game to play, but it's a game. It's a game nonetheless, and it's a bit of engagement. Craig, I'll come straight back to you because Dan and I have spoken a little bit about Thomas Frank, but we've got Donny on Twitter, or Donny. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name there. He says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. Thank you very much." Thomas Frank getting a lot of heat at Spurs. Are you surprised at how poor they are playing? Personally, I'm not. I think the players he has their report, a combined 11 of Brentford Spurs would have more Brentford players. Thoughts, Craig?
I do feel really, really bad for Thomas Frank, and that's probably because of his legacy at Brentford that I do have a lot of sympathy for him. When you look across that team, there is a lot of quality. You've got Van der Ven, you've got Bergwall, who's a great player. I mean, at one point, anybody would have wanted Solanke in their team. I know he's not been fit and things like that, but a lot of people would have wanted him in their team, especially after how well he did at Bournemouth. the problem is the consistency in the quality of the football that they've been playing, and that's where they've been struggling. And they keep shooting themselves in the foot. And it was obviously I'm not a Spurs fan, but that game against Fulham was a tough watch.
Yeah,
as someone who was hate watching Fulham, that was a tough watch. You know,
that game that we have against them, Dan, on Saturday. I don't think he wouldn't have gone if they'd have lost against Fulham. But I think it's now more on the side of Frank out as opposed to Frank. There's more Frank outers than there are Frank in now. I think.
Just before we talk about that, they've got Newcastle midweek, and that's not an easy fixture either. Yeah,
so they could potentially come into the game off the back of 5 straight defeats in all competitions, I want to say, or maybe 4 straight defeats if they lose to Newcastle tomorrow. But yeah, Dan, that game on Saturday, you couldn't write that Brentford could go to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and be the team to end Thomas Frank's tenure. And I just think that the fan reaction to that, if we go to their place and beat them, and obviously that's a tough ask given our away form this season, but if we did, can you imagine that for Thomas Frank?
I am trying to imagine it. Nothing makes me too confident after our away form this season, if I'm honest.
No.
I'm still not going into that one feeling confident. I do really feel for Thomas Frank. I think, if we're comparing Brentford to Tottenham, I think the front 3 he had last season are better than what he's had available at Tottenham, given obviously Solanke's not been fit, Kulusevski's not been fit, Maddison in midfield's been injured all season as well. So I feel for him in that aspect, and he's gone with that defence first approach against the likes of Chelsea and Arsenal, but they just have nothing on the break, lumping it up to Richarlison like he's going to hold it up like Ivan Toney. It's not going to happen. I suspect he might go there in January to maybe do that job, but I do feel for him. I still think they should give him time, but their performances have got worse, and the Arsenal game in particular is absolutely awful, and they don't help themselves by going 2-0 down in 6 minutes against Fulham. What I will say, next week, if we start well, if we get the first goal,
toxic,
they will turn. Do you see Vicaria? They were just booing him when he had the ball, and I've never seen any fan base just target a particular player and just boo every time they have the ball.
Actually, we had John Swift. I just want to put that out there. I hated watching John Swift play for us.
It is that game on Saturday though. The thing is with Spurs, right? I was listening to a Spurs podcast. I'm kind of interested in this whole Thomas Frank stuff. And someone asked Jay Harris, it's the Athletic Spurs podcast called View from the Lane. They asked Jay Harris, how much did Brian Mbeumo, Johan Wisser and Kevin Schade cost Brentford? It's like around 35 mil combined or around that kind of mark. They paid £50 million for Richarlison. 50 million for Richarlison. And you just I think the issue and the worries that we all had about Thomas Frank going to Tottenham and it not working was that the recruitment at Tottenham for the last 10 years has just been absolutely shite. Whereas the recruitment at Brentford over the last 10 years has arguably been the best in England. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know if it's Tottenham fans overrating, because look, you're right. If you look at players individually, I'm looking at their lineup from the game on Saturday: Porro, Van de Ven, Udogie, Palhinha, Gray, Bergvall. Gray, someone that Thomas Frank chased at Brentford, got Johnson. It's there's quality there. But there are other players that I just think, Jesus Christ, I'd rather have Jordan Henderson. I'd rather have Yihoy Moliak. So yeah, I think
I was going to say that's one for maybe not for us to think about, for people watching, is what is the combined 11 for Brentford and Spurs? Because I think that Donny's could be right here that now there probably would be more Brentford players in there. I mean, I think Spurs fans, based on that, will put Kelleher in over Vicario straight away. You know what I mean? There's one and done. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we were above them in the table as well. Who would have predicted that after 13 games of the season that Brentford would be above Spurs? That's funny.
What's Thomas Frank meant to do about Vicario as well? What the hell was he doing? Just kick it out.
I don't know.
Why are you playing it back into Harry Wilson from there?
No, but it's nice to know that Harry Wilson scores against other teams.
He who must not be named on this podcast.
Only when they're managed by Thomas Frank.
It's a Thomas Frank team. There you
It's
go.
a Thomas Frank thing. He hates Thomas Frank. Should we talk about Arsenal then? Let us know in the comments the Brentford Spurs combined 11 because that's quite fun. Arsenal, Craig, how do we think we'll set up? I don't think we've seen the back five for quite a long time. I can't remember the last game we saw it in. But do you think it will come back against Arsenal?
See, I would have said yes, but with the injuries that Arsenal are suffering at the moment, the punishment that we'll have from them will inevitably be set pieces. That's their forte. That's their strong point. But when they've lost players like Saliba and Gabriel, possibly both being out, and we saw the game last night that they were susceptible to set pieces themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
If we go for a back five, I think that the only reason we'll go to a back five is if Thiago is injured and doesn't play. Actually, I think that's the only reason we'll go to a back five with Sharda and Dango as the top two. But I don't like playing that because it takes Damsgaard out of the game and it nullifies him when we do play with a back five. But it's one of those ones where at the start of the season we're going, oh, this is one of those games that you go to a back five. This is one of those games that you go to a back five. But we didn't do it against Liverpool. We didn't do it against United. I can't remember if we did it against United. We didn't do it against Newcastle. Like, if we're considering this game a free hit, don't go to a back four, man. Keep it as a free hit. Attack them. They've got their injuries. They've got their problems. And if we attack them and we nick a point out of this game, amazing. If we go out and attack them and we lose 1-0, 2-0, but we've given them a game, you can't criticize it. But if we go to about five and just roll over and let them tickle our bellies and let them do what they want to do, that's when we'll come back here, possibly after the Spurs game as well, and go, we've made the wrong decision. That was not the right thing to do. I think that be brave, stick with the back four, attack them. Keith Andrews has nothing to lose in this game if he goes for a back four.
Dan, what do you reckon?
It's a free hit, nothing to lose. I think if we do go back five, he's got to go aggressive with the fullbacks. We got to get forward. So the background noise is getting quite loud now.
Can't hear it.
But hopefully, I'm just looking for a good performance. I think, again, this is one where Keith Andrews is probably going to get criticised no matter what. I think Arsenal, if you look at the season as a whole, are probably in their own level in terms of the standards they've had and the consistency they've had all season. So it's a free hit. Go there, nothing to lose. Try and be aggressive, even if it is a back five. There's a way to play it. The fullbacks have got to get high. We've got to progress the ball. We've got to try and hit them on the counter, because if we're just sitting back and soaking up pressure, they will score eventually.
Yeah, no, I think I'm in agreement there. I think that'll be a good point to round the podcast off as well. We'll be back in midweek with a Spurs preview, which should be coming out on Thursday. And then we'll be back after that with the Spurs and kind of Arsenal wrapped into one full-time show, probably on the Monday next week. So drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Arsenal game. There was a few nice little games that we got from that podcast. What's the worst Brentford half of football you've ever seen? What's your Spurs and Brentford combined 11? Let us know in the comment section. We should talk about the game as well. Let us know what your thoughts are ahead of the Arsenal game. Thoughts around the Burnley game too. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Eden Road on Twitter, at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Gents, a pleasure as always.
Up the bees.
Up the bees.